The Vienna Concert Hall stood like a palace in the heart of the city. Its walls were covered in gold. Its ceilings reached up to the sky with paintings of angels and clouds. Crystal chandeliers hung from above, throwing light in every direction like frozen waterfalls made of diamonds. This was a place where rich people came to feel important. This was a place where famous musicians played for crowds who paid thousands just to sit in velvet chairs. On this cold November evening, the hall was preparing for its biggest night of the year. The annual charity gala brought together the wealthiest people in Europe. Women wore dresses that cost more than most people earned in a year. Men walked around in suits so perfect they looked like they had been painted onto their bodies. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne. The air smelled of expensive perfume and even more expensive ego. Nobody noticed the woman with the mop. Elena Vasquez pushed her cleaning cart through a side door. The wheels squeaked against the marble floor, but the sound disappeared into the noise of the crowd. She was 34 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was tired but kind. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets. She wore a gray uniform with the words, Vienna Concert Hall, cleaning staff printed on the back. A small name badge hung from her chest. It said, Elena, in faded letters. She had worked here for 3 years. 3 years of mopping spilled champagne. 3 years of cleaning bathrooms after wealthy guests. 3 years of being invisible. And that was fine with Elena. She had learned long ago that invisible was safe. Invisible meant no questions. Invisible meant no one looking too closely at the woman who had crossed 3 countries with nothing but the clothes on her back. Invisible meant survival. She pushed her cart past a group of donors who were laughing at something. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a watch that probably cost more than Elena's entire life savings, stepped backward without looking. His elbow hit her shoulder hard. Watch it, he said, not even turning around to see who he had bumped into. Sorry, sir, Elena whispered. She was always sorry. Sorry for being in the way. Sorry for existing in spaces that weren't meant for people like her. Sorry for taking up room in a world that had never made room for her. She continued pushing her cart toward the back hallway. The gala wouldn't start for another hour, but there was still work to do. The bathrooms needed to be checked. The backstage area needed to be cleaned. The dressing rooms needed fresh towels. Elena had a list in her pocket, written in her own handwriting, with all the tasks she needed to complete before the guests sat down for the performance. Tonight's performer was Mikhail Petrov, a famous pianist from Russia. His face was on posters all over the city. His name was in every newspaper. People said he was a genius. People said his fingers could make a piano sing like a human voice. People said he was the greatest pianist of his generation. Elena had seen him once, 2 days ago, during a rehearsal. She had been cleaning the stage when he arrived. He walked in like he owned the building. His coat was long and black. His hair was wild and gray. His eyes looked at everything like it was beneath him. When he saw Elena with her mop, he made a face like he had smelled something rotten. Get her out of here, he had said to his assistant. I cannot create art with cleaning women watching me. Elena had left quickly, her face burning with shame. She had taken her mop and her bucket and her invisible self out through the back door. She had not looked back. Now, as she walked through the backstage hallway, she could hear voices coming from Petrov's dressing room. They were loud and angry. She heard something crash against a wall. She heard someone shouting in Russian. She kept her head down and kept walking. It was not her business. Rich people had problems too, she supposed. Different problems. Problems about fame and money and ego. Not problems about where the next meal would come from. Not problems about papers and documents and borders. But problems all the same. She reached the small closet where the cleaning supplies were kept. It was a tiny room, barely big enough for one person. The walls were lined with shelves holding bottles of cleaning fluid, rolls of paper towels, and boxes of garbage bags. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, giving everything a yellow glow. Elena loved this closet. It was the only space in the entire building that belonged to her. No rich people came here. No famous musicians walked through this door. This was her kingdom, her tiny empire of mops and brooms and cleaning rags. She put on her rubber gloves and filled her bucket with warm water. She added soap and watched the bubbles form on the surface. For a moment, she stood there, just looking at the water. Her mind drifted, as it often did, to another time, Another place. Another life. She thought about her grandmother's house in Guatemala. It was a small house with blue walls and a red roof. Chickens walked around the yard. Flowers grew in pots by the window. And, in the corner of the living room, there was a piano. It was an old piano, older than Elena's grandmother herself. The wood was dark and scratched. Some of the keys were yellow with age. But when Elena touched those keys, magic happened. She had been 5 years old when she played her first note. Her grandmother, Maria, had lifted her onto the bench and placed her small fingers on the keys. "Listen," her grandmother had said. "The piano will teach you. You just have to listen." And Elena had listened. She had listened so well that by the time she was 7, she was playing songs that grown men could not play. By the time she was 9, she was composing her own music, creating melodies that made her grandmother cry with joy. "You have a gift," Maria would tell her. "God put music in your fingers. Never waste it." But God, it seemed, had other plans. Elena shook her head, pushing the memories away. That was a long time ago. That was a different Elena. That Elena had died somewhere between Guatemala and Mexico, between Mexico and the United States, between the United States and Austria. That Elena had been buried in unmarked graves along with her dreams. This Elena cleaned toilets. This Elena mopped floors. This Elena was invisible. She picked up her bucket and her mop and walked out of the closet. The gala would start soon. There was work to do. There was always work to do. As she walked toward the bathrooms, she passed a poster of Mikhail Petrov. His face stared down at her, proud and cold. Underneath his picture were the words, "The greatest pianist of our time." Elena looked at the poster for a long moment. Then she looked at her own hands, rough and red from cleaning chemicals. She remembered when those hands had danced across piano keys. She remembered when those hands had created beauty instead of just cleaning up after it. She turned away from the poster and kept walking. Tonight, Mikhail Petrov would play for kings and queens of industry. Tonight, he would receive a standing ovation. Tonight, his name would be on everyone's lips. And tonight, Elena Vasquez would clean the bathrooms. That was how the world worked. Some people were born to shine. Others were born to clean up after the shining. Elena had made her peace with that. Or at least, she had tried to. The music in her heart had gone quiet long ago. She had locked it away in a room deep inside herself and thrown away the key. It was easier that way. It hurt less. But sometimes, late at night, when she was alone in her small apartment, she would hear it. A melody, soft and distant, playing somewhere in the darkness of her memory. Her grandmother's voice, singing along. Her own small fingers, dancing on yellow keys. And sometimes, she would cry, but not tonight. Tonight there was work to do. Tonight there were floors to mop and toilets to scrub and rich people to avoid. Elena Vasquez pushed her cart forward and disappeared into the crowd of invisible workers. Just another shadow in a palace full of light. The village of San Pedro sat in the mountains of Guatemala like a secret that the world had forgotten. Green hills surrounded it on all sides. Coffee plants grew in rows that stretched toward the sky. The air was thin and clean, and the mornings were so quiet you could hear the birds singing from miles away. In this village, in a house with blue walls, lived a woman named Maria Vasquez. She was 70 years old, with white hair and hands that shook slightly when she moved. But when she sat at her piano, those hands became steady. When she touched the keys, she was young again. Maria had not always lived in San Pedro. 50 years ago, she had been a student at the Paris Conservatory, one of the greatest music schools in the world. She had played in concert halls across Europe. She had shaken hands with composers and conductors whose names were written in history books. She had been someone, but life has a way of changing plans. Maria had fallen in love with a farmer from Guatemala. She had left Paris and its concert halls behind. She had followed her heart to this small village in the mountains, where nobody knew Beethoven from a bean farmer. She never regretted her choice. Her husband was kind. Her life was simple, but she never stopped playing. Every day, she sat at her piano and let her fingers remember what her heart could never forget. When her granddaughter Elena was born, Maria saw something in the child's eyes. A spark. A light. Something that made her old heart beat faster. "This one is special," she told her daughter. "This one has music in her blood." Nobody believed her at first. Elena was just a baby, then a toddler, then a small girl who liked to play in the mud and chase chickens around the yard. She seemed ordinary in every way. But then came the day when everything changed. Elena was 5 years old. It was a rainy afternoon, and she was sitting on the floor of her grandmother's living room, playing with a doll made of corn husks. Maria was at the piano, playing a piece by Chopin. It was a sad piece, full of longing and loss. Maria played it whenever she missed Paris, which was often. When she finished, she heard a sound behind her. She turned around and saw Elena standing at the edge of the piano bench, her small face serious and focused. "Again," the child said. Maria smiled. "You want to hear it again?" Elena shook her head. "No, I want to play it." Maria laughed softly. The child was only 5. She had never touched a piano in her life. But something in Elena's eyes made Maria pause. There was a certainty there, a determination that seemed too big for such a small person. "Come here," Maria said, patting the bench beside her. "Sit with me." Elena climbed up onto the bench. Her feet dangled far above the floor. Her hands were so small they could barely reach the keys. Maria placed those tiny fingers on the piano, showing her where to put each one. "Now," Maria said, "listen to the piano. It will tell you what to do." Elena closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent except for the rain falling outside. Then, slowly, Elena pressed a key. The note rang out, clear and pure. Elena pressed another key, and another, and then, without any help, without any teaching, she began to play. It was not perfect. It was not the Chopin piece that Maria had just played. It was something else, something new. A simple melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It was the sound of rain on a roof. It was the sound of a child's heartbeat. It was the sound of something being born. Maria sat frozen, her hand covering her mouth. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. In 50 years of music, in concert halls and conservatories, she had never seen anything like this. "My God," she whispered. "My God." From that day forward, Maria devoted herself to teaching Elena. Every afternoon, after the child finished her schoolwork, they would sit together at the piano. Maria taught her scales and chords, taught her to read music, taught her the secrets that her own teachers in Paris had passed down to her. But mostly, she taught Elena to listen. "The piano is not just an instrument," Maria would say. "It is a living thing. It breathes. It speaks. Your job is not to make it do what you want. Your job is to let it show you what it wants to say." Elena understood. She understood in a way that Maria had never seen any student understand before. The child did not just play the piano. She spoke to it. She had conversations with it. She and the piano were friends, partners, two souls sharing one voice. By the time Elena was 7, she could play Bach and Mozart from memory. By the time she was 8, she was learning Liszt and Rachmaninoff, pieces that grown musicians struggled with for years. By the time she was 9, she was composing her own music. Her first composition was called Abuela's Garden. She wrote it for Maria as a birthday gift. It was a piece that started soft and gentle, like flowers opening in the morning sun. Then it grew stronger, fuller, like vines climbing toward the sky. It had parts that were happy and parts that were sad. It was only 5 minutes long, but it contained an entire world. When Maria heard it for the first time, she could not speak. She sat at the piano bench, her hands folded in her lap, and she cried. She cried for the beauty of it. She cried for the gift that God had given this child. She cried because she knew, deep in her heart, that Elena was greater than she had ever been. "You will play in concert halls," Maria told her granddaughter. "You will play for kings and presidents. The whole world will know your name." Elena smiled and hugged her grandmother tight. She did not care about kings and presidents. She only cared about making her abuela happy. Those were golden years. Every day was filled with music. Every night, Elena dreamed of melodies. She would wake up in the morning with new songs in her head, songs that had come to her while she slept. She would run to the piano and play them before they disappeared. The villagers started to notice. They would gather outside Maria's window to listen to the child play. Farmers would stop their work in the fields when they heard the music floating down from the mountain. Everyone agreed that something magical was happening in the house with blue walls. "She is touched by angels," one old woman said. "She is a gift from God," another agreed. Elena did not feel like a gift from God. She felt like a normal girl who happened to love a very wonderful thing. The piano was not just an instrument to her. It was her best friend. It was the only one who truly understood her. But golden years do not last forever. Dark clouds were gathering over Guatemala. Trouble was coming to the mountains. And soon, everything Elena loved would be taken away. It started slowly. Strange men began appearing in the village. They wore dark clothes and carried guns. They asked questions about who lived where, who owned what land, who had money hidden away. The villagers were afraid. They locked their doors at night. They stopped gathering outside Maria's window. Elena was too young to understand what was happening. She only knew that her mother looked worried all the time. She only knew that her father stopped singing while he worked in the fields. She only knew that something bad was coming. Then, one terrible night, it arrived. Elena woke to the sound of screaming. She ran to her window and saw fire in the distance. Houses were burning. People were running through the streets. She heard gunshots, loud and sharp, echoing off the mountains. Her mother grabbed her and pulled her away from the window. "We have to go," she said. Her voice was shaking. "We have to go now." "But Abuela," Elena cried. "We cannot leave Abuela." Her mother's face crumbled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Abuela is gone, my love. Abuela is with the angels now." Elena did not understand. Could not understand. Her grandmother, the woman who had given her music, the woman who had believed in her when no one else did, the woman who smelled like roses and coffee and love. Gone. There was no time to cry. There was no time to say goodbye. Elena's family fled into the night, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. They left behind their house, their village, their country. They left behind the piano. As they ran through the darkness, Elena looked back one last time. She saw the house with blue walls, still standing while everything around it burned. She saw the window of the living room, where the piano sat waiting for fingers that would never return. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run back, to save the piano, to save the music, to save everything she had ever loved. But her mother held her tight and pulled her forward, into the unknown. Elena Vasquez was 9 years old when she became a refugee. She was 9 years old when she lost her home, her grandmother, and her dreams. She was 9 years old when the music died. The journey that followed was long and painful. They walked for days through jungles and over mountains. They crossed borders in the dark of night, hiding from men with guns and badges. They slept in ditches and ate whatever they could find. Elena did not play piano again. There were no pianos in the refugee camps. There were no pianos in the crowded apartments where they stayed with strangers. There were no pianos in the new countries where they tried to build new lives. Years passed. Elena grew up. She learned new languages. She worked jobs that broke her back and calloused her hands. She became a cleaning woman, a dishwasher, a factory worker. She became whatever she needed to become to survive. But at night, when she closed her eyes, she still heard the music. She still felt her grandmother's hands guiding her fingers. She still saw the piano in the house with blue walls, waiting for her to come home. The music never truly died. It just went to sleep, hidden deep inside her heart, waiting for the day when it would wake up again. Elena did not know if that day would ever come. She had stopped hoping. She had stopped dreaming, but the music waited. It was patient. It had been waiting for 25 years, and soon, it would wait no longer. The clock on the wall showed 7:30. The gala was set to begin at 8. In exactly 30 minutes, 300 of the richest people in Europe would take their seats in the grand concert hall. They would sip their champagne. They would adjust their diamonds and gold watches. They would wait for Mikhail Petrov to walk onto the stage and give them the performance of a lifetime. But in the dressing room backstage, something was going very wrong. Mikhail Petrov stood in front of his mirror, but he was not looking at his reflection. He was looking at the bottle in his hand. It was vodka, expensive vodka, the kind that cost more than most people earned in a week. The bottle was already half empty. "Sir, please," his assistant, a young man named Klaus, begged. "The concert starts soon. You need to be ready." Petrov took another long drink from the bottle. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. "I am always ready," he said, his Russian accent thick and heavy. "I was born ready. I am the greatest pianist in the world." Klaus looked at his watch nervously. He had worked for Petrov for 2 years, and he had seen this before. The drinking before performances, the mood swings, the anger that could explode without warning. But tonight seemed worse than usual. Tonight, Petrov was not just drunk. He was dangerous. Perhaps some coffee? Klaus suggested. To clear your head? Petrov threw the vodka bottle across the room. It smashed against the wall, sending glass and liquid everywhere. I do not need coffee, he screamed. I need respect. I need people to understand who I am. Klaus stepped back, his heart pounding. Of course, sir. Everyone respects you. Everyone knows who you are. Do they? Petrov grabbed Klaus by his collar, pulling him close. His breath smelled of alcohol. Do they really? Then why do they pay me less than that American pop singer? Why do they give me a dressing room smaller than a closet? Why do they treat me like I am ordinary? Klaus did not know what to say. The truth was, Petrov's star had been fading for years. He was still famous, still respected, but he was no longer the young genius who had once set the music world on fire. Other pianists had risen to take his place. Critics had started to say that his best days were behind him. Petrov knew this. That was why he drank. That was why he raged. That was why, on this night that was supposed to be his triumph, he was falling apart. I will show them, Petrov muttered, releasing Klaus and stumbling toward the door. I will show them all. Tonight, I will play like they have never heard before. Tonight, they will remember why I am the master. He threw open the door and staggered into the backstage hallway. Klaus followed, trying to keep up, trying to think of what to do. The concert was in less than 30 minutes. The most important people in Vienna were sitting in the audience, and the star of the show could barely walk straight. The backstage area was crowded with workers preparing for the performance. Stagehands moved equipment. Lighting technicians checked their controls. The event coordinator, a woman named Ingrid, was speaking frantically into her phone, managing 100 details at once. She looked up and saw Petrov stumbling toward her. Her face went pale. Mr. Petrov, she said, forcing a smile. Are you feeling well? Can I get you anything? Petrov waved his hand dismissively. I am fine. I am perfect. I am ready to give these rich fools the greatest performance of their pathetic lives. Ingrid exchanged a worried look with Klaus. She could smell the alcohol from 3 feet away. She could see that Petrov's eyes were unfocused, that his movements were clumsy and unpredictable. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Perhaps you would like to rest in your dressing room for a few more minutes, she suggested carefully. I can delay the start by… Delay? Petrov's voice rose to a shout. You want to delay my performance? Do you know who I am? I have played for presidents. I have played for queens. I will not be delayed by some little event coordinator. People were starting to stare. Workers stopped what they were doing and turned to watch. Ingrid felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. She had spent 6 months planning this gala. She had handled every crisis, solved every problem, managed every ego. But she had never dealt with anything like this. Mr. Petrov, please, she said, her voice tight. Let us just go somewhere private to discuss. There is nothing to discuss. Petrov pushed past her, heading toward the stage entrance. I will perform now. I will show everyone. He was walking too fast, too carelessly. His expensive shoes slipped on the polished floor. He reached out to steady himself on a rack of equipment, but his hand missed. Instead, his fingers caught on a thick cable that was connected to a lighting rig. The cable pulled tight. The lighting rig wobbled. And then, in a moment that seemed to happen in slow motion, everything went wrong. Petrov lost his balance completely. He fell forward, his arms flailing wildly. His body hit the floor hard, but it was his right hand that took the worst of the impact. It twisted beneath him at a terrible angle, caught between his body and the metal base of the equipment rack. The crack was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Petrov screamed. It was not a scream of anger this time. It was a scream of pure, terrible pain. He rolled onto his back, clutching his right wrist, his face twisted in agony. My hand, he cried. My hand. My hand. Klaus rushed to his side. Ingrid stood frozen in shock. Workers gathered around, their faces pale with horror. Everyone knew what this meant. Everyone understood what a hand injury meant to a pianist. Call an ambulance, Klaus shouted. Someone call an ambulance now. Ingrid snapped out of her shock and grabbed her phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. Her mind was racing. trying to understand what had just happened, trying to figure out what to do next. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes. By then, Petrov had stopped screaming. He lay on the floor, pale and sweating, his eyes staring at nothing. The paramedics examined his wrist carefully. Their faces told the story before their words did. It appears to be a severe sprain, one of them said quietly to Ingrid. Maybe a fracture. We will not know for sure until we do x-rays. But one thing is certain, he will not be playing piano tonight. Ingrid felt the floor sway beneath her feet. Are you sure? Is there anything you can do? Pain medication? A brace? The paramedic shook his head. Even if the pain could be managed, the swelling will make it impossible to move his fingers properly. I am sorry. There is no way. They loaded Petrov onto a stretcher. As they carried him toward the exit, he grabbed Ingrid's arm with his good hand. You must cancel, he said, his voice weak but urgent. Cancel the concert. Tell them I am sick. Tell them anything. But do not let anyone else play my concert. Ingrid nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. Cancel the concert? 300 guests were already in their seats. The charity was counting on this night to raise €500,000 for children's hospitals across Europe. Sponsors had paid fortunes for the privilege of being here. The media was waiting outside. Cameras were ready to broadcast highlights around the world. Canceling was not an option. She watched the ambulance drive away, its lights flashing in the night. Then she turned to face the chaos behind her. Workers were whispering to each other. Klaus stood alone, looking lost. The clock on the wall now showed 7:50. 10 minutes until the concert was supposed to start. Ingrid took a deep breath. She had handled crises before. She had solved impossible problems. She would solve this one too. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts. There had to be someone. Another pianist. A backup performer. Anyone who could play classical piano at a professional level. She called the first number on her list. No answer. She called the second. The pianist was in Berlin, 3 hours away. She called the third, the fourth, the fifth. Each call brought the same result. No one was available. No one could get there in time. No one could save this night. 7:55. 5 minutes until curtain. Ingrid felt panic rising in her chest. This was really happening. The biggest event of her career was about to become the biggest failure. 300 important guests were about to be told that there would be no performance. The charity would lose everything. Her reputation would be destroyed. She leaned against the wall, her phone clutched in her hand, her eyes closed. She did not know what to do. For the first time in her professional life, she had no plan, no solution, no way out. That was when she heard it. A young waiter was walking past, carrying a tray of empty champagne glasses. He was talking to another waiter, his voice low, but still loud enough for Ingrid to hear. Weird, you know? I mean, she is just the cleaning lady. But I heard her humming yesterday, while she was mopping the floor outside the rehearsal room. And I swear, it sounded like Debussy. Actually Debussy. Note. Perfect. Ingrid's eyes snapped open. What did you say? The waiter looked startled. Sorry, ma'am. I was just talking about the cleaning lady. Ingrid interrupted. You said she was humming Debussy? The waiter nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am. The one with the dark hair. Elena, I think her name is. I just thought it was strange. For a cleaning lady to know classical music like that, Ingrid's heart began to beat faster. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. But what choice did she have? Where is she? Ingrid demanded. Where is Elena right now? The waiter shrugged. I do not know. Maybe in the bathrooms? That is usually where she works during events. Ingrid was already moving. She ran through the backstage area, past the workers and the equipment, past the confused faces and the whispered questions. She ran toward the public bathrooms, toward the one person who might be able to save this night. It was insane. It was desperate. It would probably not work. But Ingrid had learned something in her years of event planning. Sometimes, miracles came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, the person you needed most was the one you had never noticed before. The clock showed 7:58. 2 minutes until the concert. Ingrid kept running. The bathroom tiles were cold and white. Elena moved her mop across them in slow, steady strokes, back and forth, back and forth. It was a simple rhythm, almost like music. She had learned to find peace in these small movements. She had learned to quiet her mind by focusing on the work in front of her. The sounds of the gala were distant here. She could hear faint music from the reception area, the murmur of voices, the occasional burst of laughter. But inside this bathroom, she was alone. Just her and the tiles and the soap and the water. She liked this part of her job. The quiet moments, the spaces between. Most people hated cleaning bathrooms, but Elena did not mind. A bathroom was honest. It got dirty, you cleaned it, and it was clean. There were no complications, no pretending, no lies. Not like the rest of the world. She finished mopping the floor and moved to check the sinks. She wiped down the marble counters with a soft cloth. She made sure the soap dispensers were full. She arranged the hand towels in neat stacks. Everything had to be perfect for the rich guests. As she worked, she found herself humming. She did not even realize she was doing it at first. The melody just came, rising from somewhere deep inside her. It was a piece by Debussy, one of her grandmother's favorites, Clair de Lune, Moonlight. Her grandmother used to play it on quiet evenings, when the sun was setting over the mountains and the world was turning golden and soft. Elena would sit beside her on the piano bench, watching her grandmother's fingers move across the keys like water flowing over stones. So smooth, so natural, so beautiful. The memory brought a pain to Elena's chest. She stopped humming and leaned against the sink, closing her eyes. 25 years. 25 years since she had touched a piano. 25 years since she had heard her grandmother's voice. Some wounds never healed. They just grew quieter, hiding in the shadows of your heart, waiting for moments like this to remind you they were still there. She shook her head and picked up her mop again. No time for memories. No time for sadness. There was work to do. That was when the door burst open. Elena spun around, her heart jumping with surprise. A woman stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her face flushed and desperate. It took Elena a moment to recognize her. Ingrid, the event coordinator. The one who ran around with a clipboard, managing everything and everyone. Elena? Ingrid said, stepping into the bathroom. You are Elena? Yes? Elena nodded slowly, confused. In 3 years of working at the concert hall, Ingrid had never spoken to her, had probably never even noticed her. Now here she was, looking at Elena like she was the answer to some impossible question. Yes, ma'am, Elena said carefully. Can I help you? Is something wrong with the bathroom? Ingrid laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether to jump or run away. The bathroom is fine. The bathroom is perfect. It is everything else that is falling apart. She moved closer to Elena, her eyes searching her face. I heard something about you. Just now, one of the waiters told me. He said you were humming Debussy yesterday. Is that true? Elena felt her cheeks grow warm. She had not known anyone was listening. She had not meant for anyone to hear. I am sorry, ma'am. I did not mean to disturb anyone. It will not happen again. No, you do not understand. Ingrid grabbed Elena's arm, her grip tight with urgency. I am not angry. I need to know. Do you know classical music? Can you play piano? The question hit Elena like a physical blow. Can you play piano? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. I used to, Elena said slowly. A long time ago. When I was a child. But that was... How well? Ingrid interrupted. How well did you play? Elena did not know how to answer. How do you explain to someone what music meant to you? How do you put into words the feeling of your fingers touching the keys? The sound filling your chest. The whole world disappearing until there was nothing left but you and the music. My grandmother taught me, Elena said finally. She studied at the Paris Conservatory. She said I was good. Good? Ingrid pressed. What does good mean? Could you play at a concert? Elena almost laughed. The idea was crazy. Her, playing at a concert? In front of all those rich people? She was a cleaning woman. Her hands were made for mops, not music. Her place was in the shadows, not on the stage. Ma'am, I have not touched a piano in 25 years, she said. I do not even know if I remember how. And I am certainly not. Mikhail Petrov is hurt, Ingrid said flatly. He fell backstage and injured his wrist. He cannot perform. The concert starts in. She checked her watch and her face went pale. Less than 1 minute. 300 guests are waiting. The charity needs this money. People are depending on this night. Elena felt the world tilt around her. Petrov could not perform, but he was the star. He was why everyone was here. Without him, there was no concert. I have called every pianist I know, Ingrid continued, her voice cracking with stress. No one can come. No one is available. I have no backup. I have no plan. And then I heard about you, about the cleaning lady who hums Debussy. She looked at Elena with desperate eyes. I know it sounds insane. I know you are not a professional. I know this is asking the impossible. But I have no other choice. You are the only person in this building who might be able to play. Elena stared at her. The words echoed in her mind, bouncing off walls she had built long ago. Play. Concert. Stage. These were words from another life. Another world. They did not belong to the woman who cleaned toilets. Ma'am, I cannot, Elena said. I am sorry. I truly am. But I am not a pianist anymore. I am not sure I ever really was. I was just a child who… Please. Ingrid's voice broke. Tears were forming in her eyes. Please, I am begging you. Just try. That is all I ask. Just sit at the piano and try. If you cannot do it, if it does not work, I will understand. But please, at least try. Elena looked at this woman who was usually so composed, so powerful, so in control. Now she looked like a person drowning, reaching for any hand that might save her. And somehow, impossibly, that hand belonged to Elena. The concert, Elena said slowly. It was supposed to start already? Ingrid nodded. They are holding the curtain, but they cannot hold it much longer. People are getting restless. The sponsors are asking questions. Elena thought of the concert hall. The golden walls, the crystal chandeliers, the velvet seats filled with people who wore clothes worth more than her entire life savings. The piano on the stage, grand and beautiful and waiting. She thought of her grandmother. What would Maria say if she were here? Would she tell Elena to run, to hide, to stay safe in the shadows where she belonged? No. Elena knew exactly what her grandmother would say. She would say, "You have a gift. God put music in your fingers. Never waste it." But that was 25 years ago. Those fingers were different now. They were rough and calloused. They were made for work, not art. They had forgotten the feel of ivory keys. Had they? Elena looked down at her hands. She flexed her fingers slowly, one by one. In her mind, she could almost feel the piano beneath them. She could almost hear the notes waiting to be born. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was the craziest thing anyone had ever asked her to do. And yet, I do not have proper clothes, Elena heard herself say. I cannot go on stage in a cleaning uniform. Ingrid grabbed her hands, her face lighting up with hope. I do not care if you play naked. I do not care if you go out there in a garbage bag. Can you play? That is all that matters. Can you play? Elena closed her eyes. She saw her grandmother's face, old and kind and full of love. She saw the piano in the house with blue walls. She saw herself as a small girl, sitting on that bench, touching those keys for the first time. Listen, her grandmother had said. The piano will teach you. You just have to listen. 25 years. A lifetime of silence. A heart full of music that had been locked away and forgotten. Maybe it was time to find the key. Elena opened her eyes. She looked at Ingrid. She took a deep breath. I will try, she said. I cannot promise anything. I do not know if my fingers will remember. I do not know if I will make a fool of myself, but I will try. Ingrid let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pulled Elena into a sudden, fierce hug. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Then she grabbed Elena's hand and started pulling her toward the door. We must hurry. The audience is waiting. The stage is ready. All we need is you. They ran through the hallways of the concert hall, past the cleaning supplies closet, past the dressing rooms, past the workers who stopped and stared with confused faces. The cleaning lady, running with the event coordinator? What was happening? Elena felt like she was in a dream. Her feet moved, but she did not feel them touching the floor. Her heart pounded, but she did not feel it beating in her chest. Everything seemed distant, Unreal. Impossible. They reached the backstage area. It was chaos. Workers were whispering. A security guard was talking urgently into his radio. Someone was asking about Petrov, about what had happened, about what would happen next. Ingrid pushed through all of it, pulling Elena behind her. "Make way," she shouted. Coming through, they stopped at the edge of the stage. Heavy curtains separated them from the concert hall beyond. Through a small gap, Elena could see the audience. Hundreds of people in their fine clothes, sitting in their velvet seats, waiting for something to happen, waiting for her. Elena's legs began to shake. Her hands felt cold and numb. What was she doing? This was madness. She was a cleaning woman. She had no business being here. She had no business even thinking about. "Elena." Ingrid's voice was soft but firm. "Look at me." Elena turned to face her. Ingrid put her hands on Elena's shoulders, steadying her. "I do not know your story," Ingrid said. "I do not know what happened to you or where you came from or why you are mopping floors instead of playing concerts. But I do know this. You are here, right now, in this moment. And something brought you to this place at this time. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was something else entirely." She squeezed Elena's shoulders gently. "All I ask is that you go out there and be yourself. Whatever that means, however that sounds, just be yourself." Elena looked at the stage. At the piano sitting there, black and beautiful, gleaming under the lights. It looked so far away. It looked so close. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know," Ingrid said. "But fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is what makes courage possible." Elena nodded slowly. She took a deep breath. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of the house with blue walls. She thought of a little girl who had once made magic with her fingers. Maybe that little girl was still inside her. Maybe she had been waiting all these years for this moment. There was only one way to find out. Elena stepped forward, toward the stage, toward the piano, toward the most terrifying and beautiful moment of her life. Behind her, Ingrid whispered, "Good luck," but Elena did not hear her. She was already listening to something else. Something older. Something deeper. She was listening to the music. Elena stood at the edge of the stage, hidden by the heavy red curtains. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode from her chest. Her hands were shaking. Her knees felt weak. Every part of her body was screaming at her to run, to escape, to go back to her mop and her bucket and her safe, invisible life. But her feet did not move. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see the audience more clearly now. Row after row of wealthy, important people. Women with diamonds around their necks. Men with power in their eyes. These were the people who ran the world. These were the people who made decisions that affected millions. These were the people who had never, in their entire lives, been told no. And she was supposed to play piano for them? Elena almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She was wearing her cleaning uniform. Gray fabric, stained with soap and floor polish. Her name badge was still pinned to her chest, announcing to the world that she was staff, not talent. She had not looked in a mirror all evening, but she knew what she would see. Tired eyes, simple hair, the face of a woman who had learned to expect nothing. How could she walk out there? How could she sit at that beautiful piano and pretend to be something she was not? "Elena." Ingrid appeared beside her, her voice urgent. "The audience is getting restless. People are starting to complain. I need to make an announcement. But first I need to know for certain. Are you going to do this?" Elena turned to look at her. "I told you I would try. But you must understand. I am not sure I can. Trying is all I ask." Ingrid gripped her arm. "But I need to tell them something. I need to prepare them. They came expecting Mikhail Petrov. They need to know that something has changed." Elena nodded slowly. "What will you say?" "I do not know yet." Ingrid bit her lip, thinking. "I will tell them there has been an emergency. I will tell them we have a special replacement performer. I will ask them to keep an open mind. They will laugh," Elena said quietly. "When they see me walk out in this uniform, they will laugh." Ingrid looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes softened with something that might have been understanding, or pity, or both. "Maybe they will," she admitted. "Some of them at least. But you know what? Let them. Let them laugh, and then show them why they should not have." It was a nice thing to say. Brave. Inspiring. But Elena knew it was not that simple. The world did not work like the movies. Real life did not give second chances to cleaning women who had forgotten how to play piano. Still, she had said she would try. And Elena Vasquez, for all her faults, was not a liar. "Go make your announcement," she told Ingrid. "I will be ready." Ingrid squeezed her arm one more time, then walked away to talk to the stage manager. Elena watched her go, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Alone, except for the piano. She turned her head and looked at it again. The Steinway Grand sat center stage, black and gleaming, like a sleeping animal waiting to wake. It was the most beautiful instrument Elena had ever seen. It probably cost more than everything she had owned in her entire life combined. And yet, despite its beauty, despite its value, it was just waiting, just sitting there, silent and empty. A piano without a player was just wood and wire and ivory. It needed someone to give it voice. It needed hands to bring it to life. Could her hands still do that? Elena looked down at them. Her palms were rough from years of work. Her fingernails were cut short and plain. There was a small cut on her left thumb from a broken piece of equipment earlier that week. These were not the hands of a concert pianist. These were the hands of a survivor. But once, long ago, they had been something else. She closed her eyes and tried to remember, tried to feel the keys beneath her fingertips, tried to hear the notes rising into the air. It was like trying to catch smoke with her bare hands. The harder she reached, the more the memories slipped away. "Abuela," she whispered. "Help me. I do not know if I can do this." There was no answer. Of course there was no answer. Her grandmother had been dead for 25 years. The dead did not speak, no matter how much the living needed to hear them. But then, in the silence of her own mind, Elena heard something. Not a voice. Exactly. More like a feeling. A warmth that spread through her chest and down into her arms and fingers. "Listen," the feeling seemed to say. "The piano will teach you. You just have to listen." Elena opened her eyes. Her hands had stopped shaking. On the other side of the curtain, she heard Ingrid's voice through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I regret to inform you that Mr. Mikhail Petrov has suffered an injury and will not be able to perform this evening." The audience erupted in noise, gasps of surprise, murmurs of confusion, a few angry voices demanding answers. Elena heard someone say, "This is outrageous. I paid 10,000 euros for this seat." Ingrid waited for the noise to die down. "However," she continued, "we are fortunate to have with us tonight a very special performer, someone unexpected, someone you have never heard of, but I ask you to please give her a chance. I ask you to listen with open hearts and open minds." More murmuring. Elena could imagine the expressions on their faces. Confusion, skepticism, annoyance. Who was this unknown performer? Why should they care about someone they had never heard of? "Please welcome to the stage," Ingrid said. "Elena Vasquez." The curtain began to open. Elena felt frozen in place. The light hit her face, bright and blinding. She blinked, trying to adjust, trying to see the audience that was now staring at her. And then, just as she had predicted, someone laughed. It was a man near the front. He had silver hair and a red face and a belly that pushed against his expensive tuxedo. He looked at Elena in her cleaning uniform, with her mop-stained shoes and her simple ponytail, and he laughed like it was the funniest thing he had ever seen. Other people joined in. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to fill the concert hall with a sound that was worse than any silence. The sound of people who thought they were better than her. The sound of people who had already decided she was nothing. Elena felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to turn around. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the ground and never be seen again. But then she looked at the piano. It was still there, still waiting, still silent. It did not care about the laughter. It did not care about the expensive clothes or the diamond necklaces or the men with red faces. The piano only cared about one thing: music. Elena walked toward it. Each step felt like walking through water. Heavy, slow, impossible. But she kept moving. The laughter continued, but she did not hear it anymore. She was listening to something else now. She reached the piano bench and sat down. The seat was comfortable, worn smooth by years of use. How many great pianists had sat here before her? How many geniuses had touched these keys? And now, here she was, a cleaning woman from Guatemala, a refugee, a nobody. The laughter was fading now, replaced by curious silence. People wanted to see what she would do. Would she embarrass herself? Would she prove them right? Would this be a disaster they could tell stories about for years? Elena placed her hands on the keys. The ivory was cool against her fingertips. Smooth, familiar, like touching the face of an old friend you had not seen in decades. Her fingers naturally found their positions, settling into place as if they had done this 1,000 times before. Because they had. 25 years ago, these fingers had played Chopin and Liszt and Rachmaninoff. They had danced across keys just like these, creating beauty out of nothing. Could they still remember? Elena took a deep breath. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of the house with blue walls. She thought of a little girl who had believed she could do anything. And then, before she could think about it anymore, before the fear could paralyze her again, she began to play. The first note was uncertain, hesitant, like a voice speaking after years of silence. It hung in the air, fragile and alone. But then came the second note, and the third, and the fourth. Elena was not thinking anymore. She was not trying to remember. Her hands were moving on their own, finding the music that had been buried inside her for 25 years. It was like opening a door she had thought was locked forever and discovering that it had been open the whole time. She was playing Liszt. Liebestrom. No 3. A Dream of Love. It was one of the pieces her grandmother had taught her. One of the pieces she had played hundreds of times in that small house in the mountains. The music started soft and gentle, like a whisper in the dark, but it grew stronger with each passing measure. Fuller, richer, more alive. Elena's fingers moved faster now. They remembered everything. The touch, the pressure, the way each note should flow into the next. It was like riding a bicycle after years of not riding. Your body never truly forgets. It just waits for the chance to remember. In the audience, something was changing. The people who had laughed were no longer laughing. The people who had smirked were no longer smirking. They were sitting very still, their faces frozen in expressions of disbelief, because what they were hearing was impossible. A cleaning woman could not play like this. A nobody in a stained uniform could not make a piano sing like an angel. This was not how the world worked. But Elena was not thinking about the world. She was not thinking about the audience or their expectations or their precious rules about who was allowed to make art. She was thinking about her grandmother. She was thinking about a little girl who had once believed in magic. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe again. The music swelled, filling every corner of the great hall. It bounced off the golden walls. It sparkled in the crystal chandeliers. It wrapped around every person in every seat, holding them tight, refusing to let go. Elena played. Anne played. Anne played. The laughter was gone now, replaced by something else entirely. Something that felt like the beginning of a miracle. But this was just the start. The music was only beginning to tell its story, and Elena Vasquez, the invisible cleaning woman, was only beginning to be seen. Her fingers danced across the keys, and for the first time in 25 years, she felt alive. Truly, completely, impossibly alive. The piano had remembered her, and now, it was time for the world to remember her too. The spotlight was blinding. Elena had never known light could feel so heavy, so physical, like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. It followed her as she walked across the stage, tracking her every step, making sure everyone could see exactly who she was. A cleaning woman, a nobody, an intruder in a world where she did not belong. The stage was longer than she had imagined. From backstage, it had looked like just a few steps to the piano. But now, walking across it, it felt like crossing a desert. Each footstep echoed in the silence. Each second stretched into eternity. She could feel their eyes on her. 300 pairs of eyes, watching, judging, waiting for her to fail. Some were curious. Some were amused. Some were openly hostile, angry that their expensive evening had been ruined by this unexpected interruption. A woman in the front row leaned over to whisper something to her husband. Elena could not hear the words, but she could guess what they were. Look at her uniform. Look at her shoes. Who does she think she is? A group of men near the back were not even trying to hide their laughter. One of them said something loud enough for Elena to hear. "This is what we get for our donation? A cleaning lady concert?" His friends laughed harder. The sound cut through Elena like a knife. She wanted to stop. She wanted to turn around and run back through the curtains, back to the safety of her mop and bucket, back to the invisible life she had built so carefully over 25 years. This was a mistake. She did not belong here. She was not a performer. She was just a woman who used to play piano a long time ago, in another life, in another world. But her feet kept moving. She did not know why. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of her grandmother's voice, whispering in her ear, "Never let them see you run. Never let them know they have hurt you." So Elena kept walking, head up, eyes forward, pretending she did not hear the laughter, pretending she did not see the smirks, pretending she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She passed a music stand that had been set up for Petrov. Sheet music sat on it, perfectly arranged, waiting for fingers that would never come. Elena did not need sheet music. She had never needed it. Her grandmother had taught her to play from memory, from the heart, from the soul. Music was not something you read. It was something you felt. The piano grew closer with each step. It sat in the center of the stage like a throne, black and beautiful and impossibly grand. The Steinway logo gleamed in the spotlight. The keys were white and perfect, untouched by anyone that evening. Elena had read once that a Steinway grand piano had over 12,000 individual parts, 12,000 pieces of wood and metal and felt, all working together to create something greater than themselves. It seemed impossible that so many pieces could combine to make something so beautiful. But then again, people were like that too, made of countless parts, countless experiences, countless memories, and sometimes, when everything came together just right, they could create something beautiful as well. Elena reached the piano. She stood beside it for a moment, not touching it, just looking. Up close, it was even more magnificent than she had imagined. The wood was polished to a mirror shine. She could see her own reflection in it, distorted and strange, like looking at herself through a dream. The reflection showed a tired woman in a gray uniform. But for just a moment, Elena thought she saw something else. A little girl with bright eyes and quick fingers. A child who had believed she could do anything. Where had that child gone? Had she really disappeared forever? Lost somewhere between Guatemala and Austria? Buried under years of survival and struggle and silence? Or was she still there, hiding inside, waiting for the chance to come back? Elena took a breath and sat down on the bench. The seat was cool against her legs. She adjusted her position, finding the right distance from the keys, the right angle for her arms. Her body remembered these movements, even if her mind had tried to forget. She placed her hands in her lap and looked out at the audience. From this position, she could see them all. The wealthy, the powerful, the privileged. They stared back at her with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. A man in the third row checked his watch, as if calculating how much longer he would have to endure this embarrassment. A woman near the aisle was already reaching for her phone, probably to text someone about the disaster she was witnessing. Two teenagers in expensive suits were whispering and laughing, clearly finding the whole situation hilarious. These people had never known hunger. They had never known fear. They had never crossed borders in the dark, hiding from men with guns. They had never lost everything they loved in a single terrible night. They thought they knew what it meant to struggle, but they had no idea. Their struggles were about money and status and who got invited to which party. Real struggle was something they read about in newspapers, something that happened to other people, something they donated money to fix so they could feel good about themselves. And now here was Elena, a real person with real struggles, sitting on their stage, daring to exist in their space. Part of her wanted to hate them. Part of her wanted to play so badly that they would feel ashamed of themselves, ashamed of their laughter, ashamed of their judgment. But hatred was heavy, and Elena was tired of carrying heavy things. Instead, she thought about her grandmother. Maria had never hated anyone, not even the men who had destroyed their village, not even the violence that had stolen her life. Hatred is a poison, she used to say. You drink it hoping to hurt someone else, but you are the one who dies. So Elena did not hate the audience. She pitied them. They had everything money could buy, but they had never felt what she had felt. They had never known the pure joy of making music with someone you loved. They had never experienced the magic of fingers on keys, of sound becoming emotion, of notes becoming stories. They were poor in ways they could not even understand. Elena lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. The ivory was smooth and cool, exactly as she remembered. Her fingers spread naturally, finding their positions, remembering shapes they had not made in 25 years. The concert hall went quiet. Even the laughing teenagers stopped to watch. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Would she play? Could she play? Or would she sit there in frozen silence, proving that she was exactly the fraud they thought she was? Elena closed her eyes. She did not think about the audience. She did not think about the pressure. She did not think about the 25 years of silence or the memories of violence or the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about her grandmother's hands. Old hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, but still so graceful on the keys. She thought about sitting beside her on that wooden bench in the house with blue walls. She thought about the way the afternoon light would come through the window, turning everything golden. "Listen," her grandmother had said. "The piano will teach you. You just have to listen." Elena listened. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of her own breathing, just the distant rustle of expensive clothes and impatient sighs. But then, slowly, she heard something else. A note. A single note, soft and clear, playing somewhere deep inside her mind. It was followed by another note, and another, and another. A melody was forming, rising up from the place where she had buried it so long ago. The music had been waiting. All these years, through all the pain and fear and silence, it had been waiting for her to come back. Elena pressed the first key. The note rang out through the concert hall, pure and perfect. It filled the space, bouncing off walls and ceilings, reaching every ear in the room. And then she pressed another key, and another. She was playing. After 25 years of silence, Elena Vasquez was finally playing again. The audience sat frozen, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what they were about to witness. But Elena knew. She could feel it in her fingers, in her heart, in her soul. The music was back, and this time, she was never going to let it go. The first notes came slowly, like water finding its way through cracks in a dam. Hesitant, uncertain, searching for a path that had been closed for so long. Elena's fingers moved across the keys, and she felt like she was learning to walk again after years in a wheelchair. The movements were familiar, but strange. Her muscles remembered what to do, but they were rusty, unpracticed, afraid of making mistakes. She played the opening bars of Liszt's Liebestraum, Love's Dream. It was one of the first pieces her grandmother had taught her, back when she was just a child sitting on a bench that was too high for her feet to touch the floor. The melody was simple at first, gentle, a whisper of sound that barely filled the enormous concert hall. Some people in the back rows leaned forward, straining to hear. Others crossed their arms and frowned, already deciding that this was a waste of their time. Elena heard none of it. She was somewhere else now, somewhere far away from Vienna, far away from the golden walls and crystal chandeliers and wealthy guests in their expensive clothes. She was in Guatemala. She was in the house with blue walls. She was sitting beside her grandmother, watching those old hands dance across the keys like birds in flight. "Feel the music," Maria used to tell her. "Do not think about the notes. Do not worry about making mistakes. Just feel what the composer felt when he wrote this piece. Feel his love. Feel his longing. Feel his heart breaking and healing and breaking again." Elena felt it now. She felt Liszt's love, the desperate longing of a man who had loved someone he could never have. She felt the sweetness and the sadness, the hope and the loss. She felt it all flowing through her fingers and into the keys and out into the air. The music grew stronger. The hesitation began to fade. Elena's fingers moved faster, more confidently, remembering patterns they had practiced thousands of times in another life. Something was happening in the concert hall. The rustling and sighing had stopped. The man who had been checking his watch was now sitting perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the stage. The woman with the phone had lowered it to her lap, forgotten. The laughing teenagers were no longer laughing. They were listening. Elena did not notice. She was lost in the music now, swimming in a river of sound that carried her further and further from the shore. Her eyes were closed, her body swaying gently with the rhythm. her face transformed by an expression that was somewhere between joy and grief. She was remembering everything. The smell of coffee from her grandmother's kitchen, the sound of chickens in the yard, the way the morning mist would cling to the mountains like a soft white blanket, the feel of her grandmother's arms around her after a good lesson, squeezing her tight, telling her how proud she was. And she was remembering the bad things too. The night they fled, the fire in the distance, the sound of gunshots echoing off the hills, her mother's hand gripping hers so tight it hurt, the terrible journey through darkness, through fear, through countries that did not want them. All of it was in the music. Every memory, every emotion, every moment of her life was pouring out through her fingers and into the piano. She was not just playing notes. She was telling her story. She was showing these strangers who she really was. The piece reached its climax. Elena's hands flew across the keys, playing with a speed and intensity she had not known she still possessed. The music filled the concert hall like a living thing, wrapping around the audience, forcing them to feel what she was feeling. Some people had tears in their eyes. They did not know why. They could not explain the emotion that had suddenly gripped their hearts. They only knew that something extraordinary was happening, something they had never experienced before in all their years of attending concerts. A woman in the third row, the same woman who had whispered to her husband about Elena's uniform, was now crying openly. Tears rolled down her cheeks, ruining her expensive makeup. But she did not care. She was feeling something real for the first time in years. Maybe for the first time in her entire privileged life. Elena played the final notes of the Liszt piece. The music faded slowly, like the last light of sunset disappearing behind the mountains. The final note hung in the air for a long moment, beautiful and sad and full of longing. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Elena opened her eyes. She looked out at the audience, blinking in the bright light, slowly returning from wherever the music had taken her. She saw their faces, and for a moment, she did not understand what she was seeing. They were stunned, frozen, like people who had just witnessed something impossible. Elena's heart sank. She had failed. She had made a fool of herself. She had played badly. And now they were sitting in shocked silence, embarrassed for her, waiting for her to leave the stage, so they could forget this ever happened. But then she heard something else. A small sound at first. One person near the front was clapping. Slowly, hesitantly, as if not quite sure what to do. Another person joined in. Then another. Then more. The applause grew. It spread through the audience like fire through dry grass. People were standing up from their seats. They were clapping harder, faster, louder. Elena sat at the piano, not understanding what was happening. Why were they applauding? She had not finished. She had only played one piece. She was supposed to fill an entire evening, not just 10 minutes. But the audience did not care. They were on their feet now. All of them. 300 wealthy, important people giving a standing ovation to a cleaning woman in a stained uniform. Elena felt dizzy. This could not be real. This had to be a dream. Any moment now, she would wake up in her small apartment, and none of this would have happened. But it was real. The applause was real. The tears on the faces of the audience were real. The feeling in her chest, the feeling of joy and relief and wonder, was real. She had done it. She had played, and they had listened. The applause began to die down. People returned to their seats, wiping their eyes, adjusting their clothes, trying to regain their composure. They looked at Elena with new eyes now. She was no longer a cleaning woman to them. She was a mystery, a wonder, a gift they had not expected and did not deserve. Elena's hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. From something else, something she had not felt in 25 years. Hope. She looked down at the piano keys. They gleamed in the spotlight, white and black, simple and beautiful. They were waiting for her. They had more to say, and Elena had more to tell. She placed her hands on the keys again. The audience fell silent instantly, eager to hear what would come next. Elena closed her eyes and searched her memory for another piece, another story, another piece of her heart to share. And then she found it. Abuela's Garden, the piece she had written when she was 9 years old, the piece that had made her grandmother cry with joy, the piece she had never played for anyone else, because after that night, there had been no one else to play it for. She had not thought about this piece in decades. She had assumed it was lost, forgotten like so many other things from her childhood. But now, sitting at this piano, in this place, it came back to her. Every note, every phrase, every emotion. Her grandmother had kept it alive inside her, all these years. Waiting for this moment, Elena took a deep breath, and she began to play. This time, the music was different. It was not Liszt or Chopin or any famous composer. It was hers. It was Elena's own voice, her own story, her own heart. The piece started soft and gentle, like flowers opening in the morning sun. It was the sound of a garden coming to life, of colors spreading across the earth, of beauty growing where there had been nothing. The audience leaned forward, captivated by something they had never heard before. This was not music they recognized. This was not a piece they had studied in school or heard at other concerts. This was something new, something original, something that came from a place deeper than technique or training. Elena played on, and the music told the story of her grandmother's garden, the roses that climbed the wooden fence, the tomatoes that grew fat and red in the summer sun, the herbs that filled the air with their smell, the butterflies that danced from flower to flower, painting the world with color. And it told the story of loss, of leaving that garden behind, of never seeing it again, of carrying its memory across borders and oceans, across years and decades, holding it close like a treasure that could never be replaced. By the time Elena played the final notes, there was not a dry eye in the house. Even the man with the silver hair and the red face, the one who had laughed first and loudest, was wiping tears from his cheeks. The music faded. The silence returned. And then the applause came again, louder than before. A wave of sound that crashed over Elena and lifted her up and carried her somewhere she had never been. She had come to this concert hall as a cleaning woman, but now, she was something else entirely. She was a musician again, and the music had only just begun. Something had shifted in the concert hall. The air itself felt different, charged with an energy that had not been there before. The audience sat in their velvet seats, but they were not the same people who had walked through the doors an hour ago. Something had changed inside them. Elena could feel it. She could feel their eyes on her, but the weight of their gaze was different now. Before, they had looked at her with amusement and contempt. Now, they looked at her with wonder, with respect, with something that might even have been love. She had played two pieces, the Liszt and her own composition. Both had moved the audience to tears. Both had earned standing ovations. But Elena was not finished. The music was flowing through her now like a river that had been dammed for decades and was finally breaking free. She did not want to stop. She was not sure she could stop, even if she tried. The piano was calling to her, demanding more, hungry for the songs she had kept locked away for so long. She began to play again without announcing what piece she would perform. She did not need to announce anything. The music would speak for itself. This time, she played Chopin, the Ballade No. 1-inch G minor. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire, a 12-minute journey through every human emotion, requiring technique and stamina that most professional pianists spent years developing. Elena had learned it when she was 8 years old. Her grandmother had thought she was too young, that the piece was too advanced. But Elena had insisted. She had practiced for months, playing the same passages over and over until her small fingers ached, until Maria had to carry her to bed because she was too tired to walk. Now, 26 years later, her fingers remembered. The piece began softly, mysteriously, like a story being whispered in a dark room. The notes crept through the concert hall, drawing the audience in, making them lean forward in their seats. Then the music grew. It swelled and surged, building toward moments of incredible intensity before pulling back into quiet reflection. It was like watching a storm approach, feeling the wind rise and the sky darken, then experiencing the full fury of thunder and lightning, then finally emerging into the calm that comes after. Elena's hands moved across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. Her fingers flew, striking notes so fast they blurred together into a continuous stream of sound. Sweat appeared on her forehead. Her breathing grew heavy, but she did not slow down. She could not. The music was in control now. She was just the vessel through which it flowed. In the audience, people sat in stunned disbelief. Professional musicians who had studied piano for decades recognized what they were seeing. This level of playing did not come from practice alone. This was something else. This was genius. A music critic from one of Vienna's major newspapers sat in the fourth row. His name was Heinrich Weber, and he had reviewed concerts for 30 years. He had seen all the great pianists of his generation. He had written about talent and technique, about brilliance and mediocrity. He thought he had seen everything. He had never seen anything like this. His notebook sat open on his lap, but he had stopped writing. He could not look away from the stage long enough to form words. All he could do was watch and listen and feel his understanding of music being completely transformed. This woman, this cleaning lady in her gray uniform, was playing better than anyone he had ever heard. Better than Petrov, certainly. Better than most of the famous pianists who toured the world's great concert halls. There was something raw and pure about her playing, something that went beyond technical skill into the realm of the spiritual. She was not just playing the notes. She was living them. Elena reached the climax of the ballade. Her hands crashed down on the keys, producing sounds that were almost violent in their intensity. The music roared through the concert hall, filling every corner, shaking the chandeliers, making the floor vibrate beneath people's feet. And then, suddenly, it was over. The final notes faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The audience sat frozen, as if waking from a dream. Then the applause exploded. It was not like the applause from before. This was something else entirely. This was 300 people jumping to their feet simultaneously. This was hands clapping so hard they stung. This was voices shouting bravo and incredible and more. Elena sat at the piano, her chest heaving, her hands trembling, her eyes bright with tears. She had done it. She had played the Chopin Ballade, one of the most difficult pieces ever written, without a single mistake. After 25 years of not touching a piano, it was impossible. It should have been impossible, but her grandmother had always said that music was not about possibility. It was about the soul. And the soul did not forget. The soul kept everything, stored it away, waiting for the moment when it would be needed. The applause continued. It showed no sign of stopping. People were cheering now, whistling, stamping their feet on the floor. The noise was overwhelming. A wall of sound that pressed against Elena from all sides. She looked out at the audience, and she saw something she had never expected to see. The faces of these wealthy, important people were transformed. The masks of sophistication and superiority had fallen away. They looked like children, full of wonder, full of joy, experiencing something magical for the first time. She had given them a gift. In return for their laughter and their judgment, she had given them beauty. She had shown them that miracles could happen in the most unexpected places, that greatness could come from anyone, that the human spirit was stronger than circumstance. Elena stood up from the piano bench. Her legs were shaky, her whole body exhausted from the physical and emotional demands of the performance. But she managed a small bow, acknowledging the audience's appreciation. The applause grew even louder. People were pushing forward, trying to get closer to the stage. Security guards had to step in to maintain order. It was chaos, beautiful chaos. The kind that happens when something truly extraordinary occurs. Backstage, Ingrid stood with tears streaming down her face. She had been watching through a gap in the curtains, barely able to believe what she was seeing. She had taken a desperate chance on an unknown cleaning woman, and that cleaning woman had just delivered the greatest performance the Vienna Concert Hall had seen in decades. "My God," she whispered to Klaus, who stood beside her, equally stunned. "My God, what have we witnessed?" Klaus shook his head. He had no words. There were no words for what had just happened. On stage, Elena looked down at her hands. They were the same hands that had mopped floors this morning, the same hands that had scrubbed toilets and wiped counters and emptied garbage bins. But now, those hands had reminded the world what they were truly capable of. She thought of her grandmother. She wished Maria could have been here to see this, to see the little girl from the house with blue walls standing on the stage of one of the world's great concert halls, receiving a standing ovation from people who had never imagined she existed. "I did it, Abuela," Elena whispered, too soft for anyone to hear. "I did it." And somewhere, in a place beyond the reach of the living, she could have sworn she heard her grandmother's voice reply, "I knew you would, mi amor. I always knew." The applause continued. Elena stood in the spotlight, bathed in golden light, surrounded by the sound of 300 hearts beating as one. She had walked onto this stage as a nobody. She was walking off as a legend. But the night was not over yet. There was still more music to play, more stories to tell, more miracles to perform. Elena sat back down at the piano. The audience instantly fell silent, eager for more. And Elena, the cleaning woman who had become a star, began to play again. Elena played for 47 minutes. She did not plan it that way. She did not look at a clock or count the songs or think about how long she had been sitting at the piano. Time had become meaningless. There was only the music, flowing through her like breath, like blood, like life itself. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, her fingers moving through the haunting melody, like ghosts walking through an empty house. She played Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece she had been humming in the hallway, the piece that had started everything. She played Rachmaninoff and Schubert and Mozart, pulling masterpieces from her memory like magician pulling scarves from a hat. And between the famous pieces, she played her own music. Songs she had composed as a child in Guatemala, songs that had never been heard by anyone but her grandmother. Each one was a window into her soul, a glimpse of the life she had lived, the pain she had suffered, the joy she had found in the darkest places. The audience sat in absolute stillness. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seat. No one checked their phone or whispered to their neighbor. They were hypnotized, caught in a spell that Elena was weaving with nothing but sound and silence. Some people had given up trying to hold back their tears. They let them flow freely, not caring about ruined makeup or public appearances. The music had stripped away their defenses, their walls, their carefully constructed images. For 47 minutes, they were not wealthy donors or business leaders or society figures. They were just human beings, feeling something pure and true. Elena played her final piece. It was not something she had planned. It came to her in the moment, rising up from a place she did not know existed. It was a new composition, something she was creating right there, in real time, in front of 300 witnesses. Her fingers moved without conscious thought, finding notes she had never played before, building a melody she had never heard. It was the story of her journey, not just tonight's journey, from bathroom to stage, but the journey of her whole life. The happy childhood in Guatemala, the loss of her grandmother, the desperate flight through dangerous countries, the years of struggle and survival, the invisible life of a cleaning woman, and finally, impossibly, this moment. The music told it all. Every emotion, every experience, every heartbreak, and every hope. It was autobiography in sound, a life condensed into notes and rhythms and harmonies. When she finished, she held the final chord for a long moment, letting it ring through the hall, letting it fade slowly into silence. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. It was over. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was so deep, so complete, that Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then the first person stood. It was the woman in the third row, the one who had whispered about Elena's uniform at the beginning. She rose from her seat, her face wet with tears, her hands already coming together in applause. Another person stood. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. 300 people, standing as one, applauding with everything they had. But this was not like the applause from before. This was something deeper, something more. It was not just appreciation for a good performance. It was gratitude. It was respect. It was love. The applause went on and on. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. People's hands must have been hurting, but they did not stop. They could not stop. To stop would have been to break the spell, to end the magic, to return to the ordinary world where cleaning women did not play piano like angels. Elena sat at the bench, overwhelmed. Tears were streaming down her face now, cutting tracks through the dust and sweat. She was shaking, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and emotion. She had given everything, every ounce of energy, every piece of her heart, every memory she had tried to bury. She had poured it all into the piano, and the piano had transformed it into something beautiful. The applause continued. 5 minutes now, then 7, then 10. Someone in the audience started shouting, "Brava! Brava!" Others picked up the call. Soon the whole hall was echoing with the word, a chorus of voices celebrating a woman they had laughed at an hour ago. Elena stood up from the bench, Her legs nearly gave out beneath her, but she caught herself on the edge of the piano. She straightened up, took a deep breath, and faced the audience. She looked out at them, these people who had changed before her eyes. She saw the man with the silver hair, the one who had laughed first. He was clapping so hard his face was red, and there were tears on his cheeks. She saw the teenagers who had mocked her, now standing on their chairs to see better, their young faces filled with awe. She saw Ingrid, standing in the wings, sobbing with relief and joy. She saw the workers who had stared at her in confusion when she ran past them earlier, now watching with expressions of disbelief. And she saw, in the very back row, a small old woman who had not been there before, a woman with white hair and wrinkled hands and eyes that sparkled with pride. Elena blinked, and the woman was gone. Had she imagined it? Had her exhausted mind created a vision of her grandmother, here to witness her triumph? It did not matter. Real or imagined, Elena knew her grandmother was with her, had always been with her, would always be with her. She bowed deeply, from the waist, the way her grandmother had taught her to bow after a performance. When she straightened up, the applause somehow grew even louder. People were starting to leave their seats, pushing toward the stage. Security guards tried to hold them back, but the crowd was too enthusiastic, too eager to get closer to the woman who had just changed their lives. Ingrid rushed onto the stage, grabbing Elena's arm to steady her. "You need to get backstage," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "It is not safe here. People are going crazy." Elena nodded, too exhausted to speak. She let Ingrid guide her toward the wings, away from the spotlight, away from the crowd. But before she left the stage, she turned back one last time. She looked at the piano, sitting there in the center of the light, beautiful and patient and eternal. "Thank you," she whispered. The piano did not answer, but Elena felt something, a warmth in her chest, a sense of completion, a feeling that something broken had finally been healed. She had come to this concert hall as a ghost, invisible and forgotten. She was leaving as something else entirely. Backstage, reporters were already gathering. Someone had called the media, and journalists with cameras and microphones were pushing through the doors, desperate to be the first to tell this incredible story. The cleaning woman who played piano, the nobody who became a star, the refugee who reminded Vienna what music was really about. It was the kind of story that would spread around the world. By morning, Elena's face would be on every news website, every social media platform, every television screen. But Elena did not know that yet. All she knew was that she was tired, more tired than she had ever been in her life, and that somewhere, in a place beyond the reach of the living, her grandmother was smiling. The applause from the concert hall was still echoing in her ears as Ingrid led her to a small room backstage. "Sit," Ingrid said, pushing her gently into a chair. "Rest. I will bring you water." Elena sat. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 25 years, she felt at peace. The music had found her again, and this time, it would never let her go. The video went viral within hours. Someone in the audience had recorded the entire performance on their phone. By midnight, it had been shared 10,000 times. By morning, 10 million. By the end of the week, half the world had seen the cleaning woman who played piano like an angel. The story spread like wildfire. News channels ran special reports. Newspapers printed front-page articles. Talk shows discussed it for hours. Everyone wanted to know, who was Elena Vasquez? Where had she come from? How had such talent remained hidden for so long? Elena woke up in her small apartment the morning after the concert to find 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and a crowd of reporters standing outside her building. Her neighbor, an old woman who had lived next door for 3 years without ever speaking more than 2 words to her, knocked on her door with tears in her eyes. "I saw the video," the neighbor said. "I had no idea. All this time you were right next door, and I had no idea." Elena did not know what to say. She was still trying to understand what had happened, still trying to believe it was real. She turned on the television and saw her own face looking back at her. A news anchor was telling her story, showing clips from the performance, interviewing music experts who called her playing extraordinary and once in a generation. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Cleaning woman stuns Vienna with historic concert." Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. It was Ingrid. Elena, I need you to come to the concert hall. There are people here who want to meet you. Important people. This is going to change your life. Elena dressed in the nicest clothes she owned, which were not very nice at all. She did not have fancy dresses or designer shoes. She had the clothes of a working woman, practical and plain. But she put on her best blouse and her cleanest pants and she went to the concert hall. When she arrived, she could barely get through the door. Reporters surrounded her, shouting questions, pushing microphones in her face. Security guards had to escort her inside, creating a path through the chaos. In a conference room backstage, she found Ingrid sitting at a table with several well-dressed people. They all stood when Elena entered, as if she were royalty. Elena, Ingrid said, smiling widely, let me introduce you to some people who are very eager to meet you. The next few hours were a blur. Elena shook hands with executives from 3 different record labels, all of them offering her contracts. She met representatives from concert halls in London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, all of them inviting her to perform. She spoke with documentary filmmakers who wanted to tell her story, journalists who wanted exclusive interviews, agents who wanted to represent her. Everyone wanted a piece of the cleaning woman who could play piano. Elena sat through all of it in a daze. These things did not happen to people like her. People like her did not sign record deals or perform in famous concert halls. People like her mopped floors and scrubbed toilets and remained invisible until the day they died. But the world had different plans. 3 weeks later, Elena received a letter that changed everything. It came from Guatemala, from a music school in Guatemala City called Escuela de Música Santa Maria. The letter was written by the school's director, a woman named Carmen Flores. Dear Miss Vasquez, the letter read, we have seen the video of your performance. We have read about your story. We know about your grandmother, Maria, and the gift she gave you. We write to you today with a request that we hope you will consider. Our school serves children from poor families, children who cannot afford private music lessons, children whose talent might otherwise be lost forever. We believe that music can change lives. We believe that every child deserves the chance to discover their gift. We would be honored if you would consider coming to our school, not as a performer, but as a teacher. We want you to do for our students what your grandmother did for you. We want you to find the next generation of forgotten prodigies and give them the chance to shine. We cannot offer you the money or fame that the record labels can offer. We can only offer you the opportunity to make a difference, to pass on the gift that was given to you, to honor your grandmother's memory in the most beautiful way possible. Please consider our request. Guatemala needs you. Your grandmother's legacy needs you. The music needs you. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she put it down and cried. She thought about all the offers she had received. The record deals worth millions of dollars. The concert tours that would take her around the world. The fame and fortune that were suddenly within her reach. And then she thought about her grandmother. About the house with blue walls. About a little girl who had learned to play piano because someone believed in her. Maria had given up Paris and its concert halls to follow her heart to Guatemala. She had left behind fame and success to live a simple life in the mountains, and she had never regretted it, because she knew that love was more important than applause, that teaching was more important than performing, that passing on a gift was more important than keeping it for yourself. Elena made her decision. 2 months later, she stood in front of a classroom in Guatemala City. 20 children sat at small desks, their eyes wide with curiosity, their fingers twitching with eagerness. They came from the poorest neighborhoods in the city. They had never had piano lessons. Many of them had never even seen a piano up close. But Elena saw something in their eyes. The same spark that her grandmother had seen in her eyes all those years ago. The same hunger for beauty, for expression, for something that would lift them above their circumstances. Welcome to your first music lesson, Elena said, smiling at them. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I am going to teach you something very important. A small girl in the front row raised her hand. What are you going to teach us? Elena thought for a moment. She thought about all the technique and theory she could teach them. She thought about scales and chords and proper hand position. She thought about all the things her grandmother had taught her over the years. But that was not what mattered most. I am going to teach you to listen, Elena said. The piano will teach you everything else. You just have to listen. The children looked confused, but Elena just smiled. They would understand eventually. They would understand when their fingers touched the keys for the first time and the music started to speak to them. Back in Vienna, the janitor's closet at the concert hall sat empty. Elena's mop and bucket had been cleaned out, her uniform returned, her name removed from the schedule. Some of the workers wondered what had happened to her. Others knew the story and smiled whenever they walked past that small room. But inside the concert hall, something strange had happened. The cleaning staff reported that whenever they walked past the grand piano on the stage, they could hear something. A faint humming, a whisper of notes. As if the piano itself was remembering the night when a cleaning woman sat down and played her heart out. Some said it was just their imagination. Others said it was the ghost of the music, lingering in the air. Others still said it was the spirit of a grandmother, visiting from heaven to make sure her gift lived on. Whatever it was, it made people stop and listen. It made them remember that magic could happen anywhere, to anyone, at any time. It made them look at the invisible people around them and wonder what gifts might be hiding beneath their ordinary surfaces. Elena never returned to Vienna to clean floors again. But every few years, she would come back to perform at the concert hall. She always insisted on one condition: that the first 3 rows be reserved for cleaning staff, maintenance workers, kitchen employees, and other invisible people who kept the world running. She wanted them to know that the stage was not just for the privileged. It was for everyone who had ever dreamed of being seen. And somewhere, in a house with blue walls that no longer existed, in a garden that had long since returned to the wild, in a memory that lived in the hearts of everyone who heard this story, an old woman sat at a worn piano and smiled. Her granddaughter had found her way back to the music. The gift had been passed on. And the piano, that beautiful instrument made of 12,000 parts, continued to sing. It would always sing. As long as there were people willing to listen,